Hey guys, welcome back to Revamp, and probably haven't seen this in a while, but this is my 1989 GQ Nissan Patrol, or Y60 Nissan Patrol, or Y60 Safari, or whatever you want to call it, from whatever part of the world you're from. This used to be LPG petrol. I've converted it to TD42, and the last major video you saw, we did the cylinder head and we did a few mods to the cooling system just to try to help it stay cold. And thankfully it has since then. Engine's been going fine. It's a little tired, but it's been going fine. Now, maintenance-wise, I've probably been a little bit slack to this car because, you know, I'm helping mates all over the place with their own projects. And, of course, you end up pushing your own projects back. But time's come, I need to do some maintenance on the front end. Now, luckily, I had a complete front end. Got Jimmy and the boys to powder coat all the pieces for me. So that's all nice and clean. All we got to do is get dirty and pull the old one out. So let's get into pulling the old one out, and then we'll have a look at the powder coated pieces, have a look at anything that's worn out that I think you guys might need to keep an eye out for your own cars. And yeah, we'll rebuild all the front diff and the front suspension on my Patrol. All right, so you saw me take the calipers off there, along with a few other things. We loosened the bottom of the shocks off. We've undone our bolts for the radius arms. Now, I was hoping to take the calipers and all the brake line off all in one go, so we didn't have to bleed it, because I'm putting a completely different diff housing in this car. But what I've realized is that little hose mount there is completely 360 degrees one piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it off over here instead. This is the line that comes down from the, basically, it's just about from the master cylinder straight down. So we're going to take it off here, and hopefully we can block up the pipes. If not, I've got to reach up there and block the pipe off up there. So what I like to do is have just a little collection of these like little rubber plugs and things, and use them to just block up brake lines and stuff so that we don't lose all the brake fluid. Obviously, we're going to have to bleed the brakes, but we don't want to drain that master cylinder dry if we can help it. You can see that brake fluid comes out quite fast. There we go, a couple of little rubber grommets with a cable tie around that block. Now, if that does leak, like I was saying, I'll have to undo it up there and probably use a brake bleed nipple cover, and yeah, just cover that, do it up there. But that's all the way up there, and if it works down here, it's better. All right, so she's coming out, not too bad. You can see we've got our panhard rod undone at one end. We probably will take this out, but we'll just tie it up just to get everything out of the way. So next, really, we'll bring the car down, get the front springs out, and yeah, we'll look to start to get this diff housing out. All right, so if you've taken radius arms off a Patrol before, you'll know getting in here at the back where this eye bush is, or pin bush, is a little bit of a pain. Now, it's a bit of a sneaky way. You can actually come through the chassis here with a long extension, bit of a universal joint up in here, and a deep socket, and you can actually get your impact gun on there to undo it. Saves a bit of time and a bit of hassle. All right, so there you go. We've got the front complete axle assembly out of the car. We've got the springs out, the radius arms out, and like I was saying, I've got a powder coated one to go back in it. We've got to pull all these brake calipers off. They've been rebuilt in the past, so I'm going to reuse those. But this diff center, the whole housing, CVs, the hubs, everything won't be used on the new axle I'm going to put in. So all we really got to do is look over some of the bushes and things, some of the ball joints, make sure they're okay, and start putting the new housing back in it. But looks like we've got a bit of a windy storm picking up. So what I might do is I'll bring the car back down low, just because we don't want it maybe accidentally tipping off the hoist in the middle of the night. And we might get back onto this tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. All right, so we've got the whole housing out of the car, as you saw. We're back here the next day. Weather's looking a little bit better. It was a bit windy and starting to be a bit stormy the other night. But what we've got, I've actually got a complete another housing. Got all these parts down here, wheel hubs, all that. They've all been powder coated. Obviously, next gen powder coating's taking care of that for me. I had a few parts already powder coated a long time ago. These radius arms, or whatever you want to call them, they were powder coated. It does make them a lot easier to keep clean. These are very dirty at the moment, but like I was saying at the start of the video, hashtag lack of maintenance. These actually have caster correction bushes in them. I thought they were going to be in very poor condition, but they're still in decent condition. So we're going to re-grease those and use those with the new housing. And that's going to allow us to still use a taller spring instead of going back to a standard spring with a standard bush. So yeah, we're going to get these arms in, re-greased, and then we'll get the housing in there as well and start to try and put it back together. All right, so what we're doing, I've got Will here, Graham's brother. He's giving us a bit of a hand to just lift this housing in. We put the radius arms in, I suppose. I don't know, what do you call it? The radius arms?
Radius arms.
Yeah, I've got the radius arms in. They've got caster correction bushes in them, like I was saying before. We've just molly greased the shit out of them. And so what we're going to do, lift the housing up into here, then we'll drop the car down onto jack stands where we can put springs in and shocks in and all that stuff. And then we can go ahead and build the front axle. So we'll just lift this in. You got that?
Yeah.
And hope it behaves.
I hope so.
It's not. It's not going to. I know it's not going to.
Oh, mine's behaving.
Oh, so's mine. What's going on here? All right, so I got our nice powder coated housing in. I don't know what you guys would have seen of it. Maybe backside of my legs, I don't know. But yeah, she's in. We had to wash it out first. But yeah, that's in. So next, I'll probably look at like springs and shocks just to hold the diff in position, and maybe panhard rod. I'm just thinking that panhard rod sleeve is going to be nice and fun to get on there. It's got powder coat all over it.
Oh, mate, we'll make it work.
Woohoo! But yeah, so yeah, good stuff. All right, so probably for at least a couple of days now, I've been looking for the new gaskets for the diff onto the housing that I know I bought. And it's one of those occasions where you know you bought it, you put it in a really safe spot, but you can never find it. So luckily, the center has an old gasket on it that's still in reasonable condition. So I'm just going to put a little glue on there just to make sure it seals up. And Graham's going to give me a hand in a second to lift the center into the car. Ooh, baby. All right, so Graham's just going to try and line it up and put it in. Yeah, just got to steer that way a little bit. Aha, that was too easy. Yeah, this diff center came out of this housing, out of a chassis that had done about 100,000 Ks, had a seized engine. Actually, probably pretty sure it's one of my brother's projects. He's got a GQ as well. So it was sort of the leftover. So I'll get this in and then we can go with CVs and all the rest of the junk on the end. So click, 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 click. Just getting that right torque spec. Click, click. All right, guys, so we're starting to put the swivel housings on. And probably one of the first steps is to fit the bearings to basically the bearing holder. That, yeah, goes like that. Now, first thing you want to do is fill them up with grease. I've got what they call an easy squeeze bearing packer. Basically like a container of grease with a pusher. I'll just put a little thing in here. Yeah, I just clean my wheel bearing grease out of it, put a bit of the molly grease that you're supposed to use on these ones. And then that way they get packed nicely inside. You can pack them by hand, obviously. A bit more difficult because they have this rubber seal on here. But yeah, then putting them on, I just use a socket. We've got a press here, even with air activation, which is handy. But by all means, you could do this simply in a vise, just with a socket. You know, make sure that socket is only pushing on the central part, and press them on until they're home. You can put a bit of grease around here if you want. Like it doesn't make it do a lot of movement, but yeah, you can definitely put some grease around there. Press them down until they're home on here, and yeah, then they'll be ready to fit to the swivel housing. Pretty much as simple as that. So guys, if you're using one of these bearing packers, what you're going to have left over is some molly grease in the bottom. Now you usually use these for wheel bearings, which is actually what the bearing was that I just showed you in the previous piece of footage. So you want to get all that molly grease out before you start doing wheel bearing grease in it again. So I just like to get it, slop it into here, because you're going to use some molly grease in here with the CV shaft, and you don't want the contamination of moly grease with your high temperature bearing grease. So I give that just a bit of a scrape out, and then I can go and use wheel bearing grease in that for all my wheel bearings. All right, so if you're doing this on your own car, I highly recommend when you tear all this down apart and you've cleaned it all, if you're not quite sure, try to keep things, on the same side that they came off. It just makes it a lot easier to put back together. I might have said something about that in the Desert Storm videos that I put out. If you haven't seen those, pop them up in the corner. Pretty much this entire job, apart from being coil spring and a little bit bigger, there's not a lot of differences between doing a Nissan and a Toyota. There's a couple of differences in the kingpin bearings. Obviously, the swivel housings have the steering arms attached to them on the Nissan, while on the Toyota they are attached to the bearing carrier. So there's a few differences like that. And then obviously this one, we've got the radius arms and coil springs. Yeah, if I've missed anything in this video, catch up with any of the way you do your spring tensioning and your spring dial tensioning of the steering and wheel bearings and stuff like that. I cover all that in the Toyota video. So if you haven't seen that one and you're doing this job on a Nissan or a Toyota, they're very similar. Check out the playlist on the Desert Storm Hilux. Let's continue on with this one and we'll look at getting the swivel housing on. So the passenger side uses the twin arm steering. Then you've obviously got the brake caliper mount and everything. That goes that way. Now, if you've had them blasted and coated or anything like that, like I have, it'll be raw metal inside. See how it's starting to go orange? So I want to make sure I've got a nice covering of grease. And what I'm going to use is some of the moly grease that came out of the Easy Squeeze. And I'm just going to smear it around like that. Now, guys, as with the Hilux, there is shims for the kingpin bearings or swivel housing bearings, whatever you want to call them. So I've actually got a thin and a thick one here. This diff housing has been apart for quite some time. It may not even be all the matching parts. It's just I've chosen the best parts of what I have stored. So I'm going to actually start out with no shims at all. It could stay with no shims. I've worked on Nissans for quite some time. I even worked at Nissan at one stage. I've even seen cars fixing the infamous Nissan Patrol death wobble at Nissan without these shims in there. It just really depends on the setup. And I've actually been driving this setup with 3-inch coils, worn out shocks as it seems, with no steering stabilizer and no death wobbles. So that was with the previous diff. That's what I'll be aiming for. We'll be fitting a steering stabilizer this time, but these I'm going to see if they feel too tight without them. And like I was saying before, in the Hilux video, the Desert Storm videos, I did go into spring scaling the preload on these bearings. I'll probably just be doing it by feel. If you've done it a few times, you get to know the feel. If you haven't, then I suggest using the spring scale, looking up the spec correctly. So next on the agenda, we've got to put these in. Now make sure they're in order. There is a particular order they go in. Make sure you put them on first. And one of them is your main seal. One's a scraper. Then one's a support ring. Metal ring's a support ring. The support ring needs to stop the seal from falling inside the swivel housing. So it needs to go on last. So either refer to how you remove them or try to find a manual that has a blown out picture of it is the best way to figure out which way these go on. This one sort of stretches over, and then this one sort of does a weird kind of split. Now, one thing you'll notice here is the end of my housings on the ball end is black. Now, that's because it had some surface rust and a bit of pitting and stuff on it. So we decided to experiment and powder coat the whole thing black. Ordinarily, from about here, I don't like to sandblast or powder coat this at all. I like to keep it natural, greased, and smooth. But we're going to see if the powder coating goes all right, and if it, because it's got to stay smooth and greased. That's how the seals work. So, yeah, we're trying out some powder coating. Hey, if it works, I would highly recommend it because the surface needs, like I say, needs to be nice and smooth. It's really very hard to over-grease these. Pop that on there. Now, like I was saying, I'm doing it no shims first. All right, got our cleaned bolts. All right, so I've tightened those up with no shim in there. And some people may say that's way too tight, but I like the feel of it. And there's definitely no binding there. Now, as a lot of people know, these Patrols do have wobbling issues in the front. And I was working at Nissan when a lot of these problems were a big warranty issue on a GU. And it was actually one of the things that we found was the preloading on these top and bottom bearings. And we actually sometimes found to remove the shims altogether helped the issue. As we all know, caster is a big problem on these Nissans, as well as on the Toyotas. But yeah, keeping those bearings firm and not too loose really seem to help with that kind of death wobble shimming kind of thing that they go on in the front. So on this side, I'm quite happy with how smooth that feels. I don't feel that it's too tight at all. And I'm happy to leave that with no shims in it. All right, guys. Now, you might be wondering, well, that's not the job finished. And you're right, it's not the job finished. But what's actually happened is between me finishing the job and editing this video and trying to get it out to you guys, we've noticed that the swivel housing is leaking some grease out of it. Now, usually when the swivel housing leaks some grease, it really means that, there's oil mixing in with the grease. Now, while looking through the footage, what I didn't really show too much was this side CV and show the slight bit of damage where the axle seal runs on the axle. Now, that's obviously causing some diff oil to leak out into the swivel housing and meaning that I'm going to have to do this side again. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave the video there where we've started putting things together. What we'll do, we'll catch back up with the video when I pull this side back apart and I can show you guys where I went wrong and some of the things that you've got to look out for. Because, I've done this job quite a few times on different four-wheel drives. And look, it's something that I thought would be okay, and it's obviously not. So, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. If you want to see the follow-up video to this, where we rebuild this right-hand side again, subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, give us that thumbs up. And, of course, we always like to try and keep in contact with you guys through the comments. So, until then, I'll catch up with you next time on Next Gen Revamp.